Hi, I'm Megan. Welcome to today's live reading of How to Write a Historical Novel and Love It by T.L. Clark. Join me. Important introduction. I just want to say right from the start, there is no one way to write a book. My purpose here is to help you as best I can from my own perspective and experience. Feel free to cherish some bits and disregard others as you please. My intention is to assist you in creating a historically accurate novel. At the end of the day, you need to write your book your way. This is an introductory level guide intended for those embarking on their writing career. I appreciate that not all historical novels adhere to the principle of authenticity, but this is a guide to achieving just that. And as you've made the purchase, I'm going to assume that you're interested in writing a historical novel with some degree of accuracy. I've set the sections out into what my brain says is a logical order. Try reading it through first before applying your own order to your notes. I am a proud pantster, makes up stories as I go along. However, when diving into history, even I like to have some basics under my wing for forging my path into my first draft. Forewarned is forearmed. It just makes writing a bit easier. When I do my research, I have a Word document where I copy and paste notes or write reminders from textbooks with citations and include web links to helpful sites. You may want to do the same. As someone who performs better with pictures, I also keep a storyboard on Pinterest and some images saved in my book's computer folder. My main characters also get an internet image applied to them. We'll be dealing with the age-old questions: who, what, why, where, when, but not necessarily in that order. There will also be tips on formatting, editing, and publishing, although these will be high level and are not intended as a comprehensive guide. There are many resources should you require further details in those areas. I'll set a task at the end of each section to help you get your little gray cells into gear. By the end of this book, you should have a framework of what you're writing about, a story clothesline, if you will, upon which to hang the threads of your story, and a better idea of the publishing process. In the back of this book, you will find some helpful sites to put you on your path to becoming a published author. Eep. Okay, enough preamble. Shall we get on with it? Alrighty, let's go travel through time. Researching. When? All right, let's start with the basic questions to get your mind whirring. Don't be scared. I'm right here guiding you through, one step at a time. So the question of when sounds like a simple one, right? You may be thinking, I want to write a Victorian romance. But when specifically? Or maybe you haven't gotten that far yet, and now you're a bit confuddled. I'm going to take you through the general eras in a moment so you're crystal clear on which ones you're drawn to. Whatever time period you choose, it's always good to narrow it down to a year or time frame if you're writing about several years. You don't necessarily have to mention the date in your novel, but you need to at least know it in your head. The reason for this is that even tiny changes can make huge differences. Look at 2020, not too closely, it's depressing, but it's totally different from 2019. And so it is when we travel back through history. Ooh, tingles, we're going time traveling, folks. Era. I've seen in particular a lot of confusion between the Gregorian and the Regency eras. I've even seen Regency books with the hashtag medieval a few hundred years out there. So this seems a good point to add in a history of Britain. If you're writing about other countries or even your own, come to mention it, just be sure you know your timeline. I can't include everywhere, and as I'm a British author writing about British people, that's what you're getting as a main example. Even this is not a definitive list. Most ages can be split down into different eras, and there's always debate on such things, especially as we go further back. But I wanted to give you a general definition first. Think of the different times in terms of Chaucer, Shakespeare, Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, H.G. Wells, and J.R.R. Tolkien. We all have very different life experiences, but some things never change. Together, we'll explore the possibilities, try to leave behind preconceived notions of life through the ages. As you research, you will quite possibly uncover surprising facts. I want you to be open to these. Example: I had always assumed the Regency era was straight-laced, all prim and proper as Jane Austen portrayed it. But actually, there was an awful lot of debauchery and, whispers, many orgies. And my initial thoughts of what a knight in my medieval romance should be like were quickly quashed. He changed from a jousting tournament battling hero to more of a rural gent who was trained to fight and may be called upon to do so, but that was not his primary role. The knights of the 15th century were vastly different from their counterparts in the 5th and even the 13th centuries, all considered medieval. But that period lasted so long that many changes took place. So my message here is keep your mind open and be prepared to challenge your beliefs. Books and films have led us astray in some areas of historical knowledge, as have the Victorians. They rewrote a lot of history. I'd also like to mention before we get really stuck in, if your characters talk to you, listen. Yes, I know it sounds totally crazy, but don't worry. Honestly, it's perfectly normal for authors to experience this. I was so glad when I found the writing community online and discovered I wasn't going mad. We spend so much time thinking about our characters that we can conjure them up in our mind's eye. A good film to watch, which portrays this well, is The Man Who Invented Christmas. It's about Charles Dickens and is entertaining as well as enlightening. Excuse me. However, not everyone has that weird experience, and that's okay too. Some people are visual and see their books in their mind like a movie. Others craft their stories more technically. There is no one right way, just what is right for you. Types of writers. Whilst I'm on a roll, there are pantsters who make up the story as they go along, flying by the seat of their pants. I'm in that category. I often liken my writing experience to channeling Reiki. It's just on a different frequency. My stories come to me in the place between sleep and awake. I sort of sit at my laptop, letting words drip from my fingers. It's exciting to see what happens. I discover as I write. There are also plotters, those who outline and plan their story meticulously before they write a single word of their manuscript. They create their plots, characters, and worlds beforehand. There are even plantsters who do a little bit of both. They write a synopsis and plan key points such as the inciting incident, dilemma, and climax. Knowing what is going to happen is important to them. There will probably be many sticky notes in their writing area. I guess the method outlined in this book falls under plantster, really. By doing the research needed beforehand, we gather an idea of what our story will look like. Trust me, there will still be things you will need to look up as you go along, but at least you'll avoid having to interrupt your line of thought every 5 minutes by having some preparations in place. So, getting back to it, I've started with the Neolithic period, but feel free to venture further back if the desire grabs you. The Stone Age could be fun to look at, but I'm assuming most of you reading this won't set a story that far back. Note to self, explore this new niche. By the way, and sorry to be, this is how to suck eggs, but the century is named later than it sounds. So the 1800s are the 19th century. BC started year zero effectively. We are living in the 21st century, but our year starts with the 20. Okay, let's give you this list. Historical periods of Britain. Ancient Britain, Neolithic, 12,000 BC to 2750 BC. Bronze Age and Beaker People, 2750 BC to 750 BC. Iron Age, 750 BC to 43 AD. Roman Britain, 43 AD to 410 AD. The Middle Ages, also known as the Dark Ages or medieval, splits into early, middle, and late Middle Ages. Dark Ages start 410 AD. Anglo-Saxon raids and settlements. Fabled King Arthur lives here. 1449 to 449 to 550 AD. Separate Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, 550 to 924. United Anglo-Saxon, 924 to 1066. Danish rule is 1016 to 1042. The Norman period is 1066 to 1154. The anarchy is 1135 to 1148, but we don't mention that. The Plantagenets ends with the War of the Roses is 1154 to 1485. The fictional Robin Hood would have lived around the beginning of the 13th century. Early modern Britain, the Tudors, 1485 to 1603, included as Tudors, but also separately, the Elizabethan era is 1558 to 1603. The Stuarts is 1603 to 1714. The modern age, Hanoverian era, is 1714 to 1901. This splits down into the Gregorians, 1714 to 1837. The Regency era, when Prince George was in charge as Prince Regent, 1811 to 1820. Victorian, steampunk authors take note here, 1837 to 1901. Edwardian, 1901 to 1910. The Windsors, God Save the King, 1910 to current. I'd also like to give you a quick rundown of USA eras too, just for balance. I feel mean if I don't. There are conflicting opinions, so this is a generalization. Historical periods of the USA. Early America, maybe from the Ice Age to colonial, pre-European contact. Exploration and colonization, colonial, 1492 to 1763. Revolutionary era, 1763 to 1789. Constitutional era, the Republic, 1789 to 1815. 1800 to 1860 were the antebellum era. American expansionism, 1816 to 1860. 1828 to 1860 was the age of Jackson. The Civil War was 1861 to 1865. The Reconstruction was 1865 to 1877. The Gilded Age, or the Industrial Age, was 1876 to 1900. 1900 to 1914 is the Progressive Era. American imperialism is 1890 to 1920. The Roaring Twenties is 1920 to 1929. The Great Depression is 1929 to 1941. World War II is 1939 to 1945. Post-war America is 1946 to 1960. However, 1945 to 1989 is the Cold War. The New Frontier is 1960 to 1968. Social change is 1960 to 1975. Political conservatism is the 1980s. The Information Age is 1989 to 2000. The new millennium is 2000 to 2016. Pandemic and cultural change is 2017 to present. So hopefully that's given you an understanding of when each time period occurred. But to better understand the lives of your characters, we need to look further than just the eras, dates, and titles. It's a good start, but it doesn't give us that in-depth understanding yet. What you have above is essentially a record of the English monarchy listed by their house and the political stages of American history. If you are writing about Britain, do bear in mind that it didn't exist until 1707. Queen Anne was the first monarch of the United Kingdom of Great Britain. Yea, a woman was our first joint ruler. But before that, we had kings and queens of England only, with other nations having their own. This distinction may sound obvious, but I want to ensure that you start off on the right foot. And even before that, we had separate kingdoms. Who was the first king of England Who the first king of England was is subject to debate. Offa of America and Egbert of Wessex ruled large parts following the Roman rule, who themselves were here much longer than I appreciated at school, by the way. But majority is not all. I will forever think of Alfred the Great, born 1849 AD, as the first king, but using the same approach as above, he was king of Wessex only. Sorry, Alfred. Alessian is now commonly regarded as the first king of England from 927, king of Anglo-Saxons from 924. But if you want to get super sniffy, William I in 1066 brought in the Anglo-Norman era and could claim the honor of being our first king. I guess it depends on your own heritage and beliefs. Let's just declare King Ethelien as the first and move on, for I digress. The point is that in Britain alone, we have a long lineage of monarchs. I'm not going to list them all, you'd get bored. And you may be writing about England, Scotland, or somewhere entirely different. And this would be an exceedingly long, dull book if I listed every ruler ever. So take a moment to think about who was in charge in your novel's country and time. Even if your book doesn't focus on the ruler, their influence will be felt throughout the land. Here's where libraries and internet searches come into play. I'm helping you learn to research, not doing all the research for you. Although I do have several blog posts sharing my plethora of Regency and 15th century research notes. Links to these can be found at the end of the book. So if you're writing about those periods, your quid's in. There may also be religious and/or political leaders who control much of your nation's power or way of thinking. What edicts are in place from the Pope in Rome, for example?